This new year, why not let Audible expand your life by listening? Explore over 1 million audiobooks, podcasts, and exclusive Audible originals that'll inspire and motivate you. Tap into your well-being with advice and insight from leading professionals and experts on better health, relationships, career, finance, investing, and more. Maybe you want to kick a bad habit or start a good one. If you're interested in learning how to master your emotions and hearing scientifically backed advice for using your emotions as a tool, may I suggest Shift by psychologist and bestseller author Dr. Ethan Kross? Trust me, listening on Audible can help you reach the goals you set for yourself. Start listening today when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
So Barry, a couple episodes ago, we announced this partnership that we're doing starting this year with this really great company, AEP Connections. And I see that we've added quite a few listeners since then. So do you want to give us a little bit of a refresher here, give our listeners a refresher on AEP Connections, who they are, and why we're partnering with them?
Yes, AEP Connections hosts live webinars. I've actually done some work with them, and it's always high-quality topics in neurodiversity. But they're building a library of on-demand courses now. And this summer, they're focusing on providing you with fantastic content at your fingertips. They have courses designed specifically for on-demand with many speakers on many important topics. However, many of their live presentations from this spring are also being made available for on-demand, so you can access them now. If you aren't able to see the courses live, be sure to check them out over the summer. Also, if you need approved provider hours, and it's really important for things such as licensure, they offer many, so be sure to check out the different courses and see the approvals from so many professional agencies.
Absolutely. I know, from Kristen's point of view, I always was hearing about, I'm as an SLP, I need more hours. I need more, professional development. And it's great. It's good to be on top of your craft in that way. So if anybody's looking for some discounts on professional development, AEP Connections, they actually have a few options. So they've got bundled packages, which will, save you money, but also by being a friend of Uniquely Human, the podcast, and AEP Connections, they are extending an additional discount code. So you can save an additional 10% on this offering just by entering the promo code UH10. That's UH10 in your checkout cart. Any topics that we should be aware of, Barry, that you're doing, for instance, that I should be signing up for?
Sure, yeah. And we're talking about Gestalt language processing. We talk about neurodiversity and issues related to that, but there are many other speakers as well. And it's a real cool perk that you get the 10% discount if you put UH10 or UH10 in your checkout cart. Check them out.
Awesome. The primary purpose of Uniquely Human, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. Listeners should consult with professionals familiar with each individual or family for specific guidance.
Uniquely Human, the podcast, is produced by Elevated Studio. Music is graciously provided by Matt Savage of Savage Records.
Hi, I'm Dr. Barry Prezant, clinical scholar, researcher, and consultant on autism and neurodiversity, and a Brooklyn boy raised in the big city.
And I'm Dave. I'm none of those things, and I grew up on a farm in Illinois. But being on the spectrum myself, I have plenty of personal insight to lend.
And this is Uniquely Human, the podcast, a show that illuminates and celebrates autism and neurodiversity. So today on Uniquely Human, the podcast, we have some very special guests doing some very creative activities. And that is Courtney Willis and Jay Clipp and Jaborn. Welcome, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yes.
It is our pleasure. And so let me give you a little bit more information for our listeners. And Then during our discussion, we'd love to hear you dig in a bit about what you do and your background a bit more. So let's begin with Courtney. Courtney Willis is a neurodiversity affirming speech language pathologist, an educator, and co-founder of Spin the Spectrum, which will be the main topic of our discussion. Spin the Spectrum is the first DJ academy in the U.S. created specifically for autistic and neurodivergent individuals. Based in Dallas, she also is the founder of Speech Wings Therapy, where she specializes in motor speech, augmentative and alternative communication, and strengths-based approaches for autistic clients. Courtney also is the former chair of the Texas Executive Board for Ethics and Scope of Practice in Speech Language Pathology, and she brings both her clinical expertise and creative innovation to her work. Through inclusive music education and communication access, she's redefining what community participation can look like for neurodivergent people of all ages. And joining Courtney today will be Jay Clipp, a nationally touring open format DJ with decades of experience, and Jaborn, a Grammy award-winning producer known for his work with Erykah Badu and the Cannabinoids. And I did see Erykah Badu at the Newport Jazz Festival a few years ago, so I love this connection here. So again, welcome, and we're going to dig right in. I'm going to begin with Courtney. Courtney, share about the focus of your work now in speech pathology, and especially how that evolved into Spin the Spectrum and what Spin the Spectrum is.
Sure. Well, I have my own private practice, Speech Wings Therapy. And so, I've always been a person that has really loved what I do. I've never, ever wanted to do any other job than the job that I had, to be perfectly honest. And so, although I really, really loved doing what I did or what I do, I always kind of, I don't know. To me, communication really is about creating a shared agenda. And in the world of speech pathology, when you're working on, on speech goals and targeting speech goals, at least in the initial stages, I still felt like I'm asking my patient to follow my agenda. And I always just kind of, I'm a curious person. And so I always have wondered my whole career, well, the first time we meet and hang out and everything else, if you're my patient, you know what I like, what toys I have, you know how I like to play with, things and what games I enjoy and books that I like to read. But what do you like? And I always kind of thought, well, what would happen if I just started from that point? And the other, I guess, end of it is when I got further into therapy, especially with a lot of my older patients, they would get involved in extracurricular activities. And a lot of the time, they would kind of get into this activity. They'd be so excited about it. And then a couple weeks later, their mom or dad would be like, well, we're not doing that anymore. And I would have no idea they had even started this thing or whatever. And they'd be like, well, they had one meltdown and the teacher was like, no, you can't come back, yada, yada. These things happen sometimes. And I would always just kind of think, well, God, if I could just get in there and I could be in there and I could explain, either what was going on, to the instructor, or I could adequately prepare my student, like, social stories and visual supports and plan when we want to take breaks and create strategies for how to regulate ourselves and things of that nature. I always felt like they could do it. And so I felt like they were needlessly kind of being deprived of something that they really loved, because it's harder to do that retroactively, provide that support, especially after they've already had a meltdown and, or they've just become dysregulated. And the instructor kind of has a feeling about that.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but you're actually striking an emotional nerve with me personally, because speaking on behalf of the folks who have these quote unquote inexplicable meltdowns, we don't want to be that person. And the damage is already done when you start to feel ashamed afterwards.
Yes.
And by the way, what I've noticed with myself, with my own kids, with people in the community, I've noticed that you don't even have to shame them. Like a switch flips, you get back into some kind of regulated state and you're like, oh, I'm the worst person. Oh, why am I such a failed version of normal? And the damage is already done, but please continue. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so, Spin the Spectrum has kind of allowed me to explore that. Like, from our very first class, when our kids or our students come in, one of the first things we tell them is, whatever you need to do in here to feel okay is okay with us. And we, proactively say, if you have a tricky day and if you become dysregulated, we are still going to think you're okay. And we're still going to like you when you come back in the next time. We're still going to think that you're cool and feel the same way about you. And we go ahead and just put that out there, from the very first class. And oddly enough, for the entire time we've been doing this, and I know this does not sound realistic at all, we haven't had anybody become dysregulated to the point where they've had a meltdown. And we've been doing this for like 4 years.
So you're talking about a non-judgmental, loving and accepting approach.
Yep.
And with Spin the Spectrum and with Jay and Jad, I mean, you created this context. So why don't you talk about how the partnership developed and kind of what role you all play and what you actually do, so our listeners can kind of visualize what happens when some of your clients come in, and then we'll talk about how that has evolved into community participation.
It's almost like going from being a player to a coach. I'll let Jay take the lead on how he and I started.
Yes. So we have the same birthday, November 21st. So, I guess, twins in a sense, you know what I'm saying, as far as that goes. But I was invited to Lagos, Nigeria to DJ an event for a World Autism event in Lagos, Nigeria. And they asked me, hey, do you know any SLPs, that would be good to work with, what we're doing, in Africa? And I said, as a matter of fact, I actually do. And I, reached out to Courtney. I was familiar with, the work that she was doing. I think at the time you were in the process or almost at the finish line of completing everything, right?
I had just finished my clinical fellowship year, and literally with ASH, after you pass your praxis and you complete your clinical fellowship year, they give you your C's, your certificate of clinical competency.
I could ask 1,000 DJs if they know an SLP, and the answer will be no.
Probably no.
1,000.
Most of them would ask you, what is an SLP?
Is that a turntable?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's go back to Nigeria. I'm curious what happened.
Yeah.
So while we were there, we obviously connected, and we liked what we were doing, and we said, okay, well, at some point we're gonna figure out how we can combine what we do. At the time we didn't have like an initial idea of how we were going to do it. Mm-hmm. So fast forward years later, during the pandemic, this is,
Well, you want me to tell this part?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pre-pandemic, like after we got back from Lagos, Nigeria, I happened to be watching a Netflix special on Grandmaster Flash. And weirdly enough, I was watching it right before I had to go pick something up from Jay's house. It was like literally 45 minutes before. I just happened to turn that on, and Grandmaster Flash was talking, and he said, as a kid, I was really interested in anything that plugged into a wall. And I especially loved things that spun around. I loved washing machines and dryers. And I loved taking them apart and putting them back together again. And I think, and I'm paraphrasing here, I think he said something to the effect of, I wasn't really social, but I really loved working with machines. And I really enjoyed a sound being produced repeatedly over and over and over again. I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to make any assumptions at all, but I do know a lot of people that are also interested in that as well. But he made this comment, in the documentary, where he said, I got behind the turntables and I had total control over everything. And he said it allowed me to be a part of the party, but I still had control. And then I thought, wow, well, I really know a lot of, people that I feel like would enjoy that. And so then literally that went off and I drove to Jay's house and I thought, okay, well, I do know a DJ. And so, at that point I was like, hey, I just watched this documentary and I think this would be great for, autistic, kids or students or whatever, because Jay actually has he has the oldest and top DJ school in Dallas. And so, he already had a DJ school and I just said, hey, I think we should start doing DJ classes for, autistic and neurodivergent students.
If I could interject in the language of Uniquely Human, we're talking about enthusiasms, a person's enthusiasm, what they absolutely love to do, what rivets their attention, what helps them regulate in so many ways. So how did Ja get involved with you all and kind of spin the spectrum here?
Well, what happened with that is that after we started, and just to, kind of piggyback off those enthusiasms, ironically, after she mentioned that to me, one of the first, a mom called and said, hey, I have a son who's interested in making music. He's autistic. He has 2 iPads and he tries to basically mix 2 different songs together on the iPads. And at that point, I knew it was the demand and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, let's go for it. And we just started doing it. So from there, continuing to do classes and putting it out there. And, we knew that this was something we could do. So fast forward to was earlier this year, we had, very, interesting student to come in who wanted to, take DJ classes.
And we always knew we wanted to add production to in our nonprofit, statement. We're listed as a DJ and production school.
Yeah.
And, I personally did not know Ja Bourne before this, but it literally the first time I met him, he was coming in from picking up his plaque from having one of Apple Music's top 100 songs of all time.
Exactly.
It's like the right people appear at the right time. Yes.
So he and I were already, personal friends. And we had, both worked with Erykah Badu. He initially, he set the whole, he introduced her to the world with On and On. But then, just, crossing paths and, working with a lot of the same musicians, he and I became personal friends. And so fast forward to, we meet a student, he comes in, he wants to take DJ classes. But when he comes in, he's more interested in taking beats and elements of a beat from one song and then taking, lyrics from another song, because I literally just showed him how to do this within the first 10 minutes of his first class.
He was using turntables to do this.
And at that point, okay, like he's making pretty much what we call mashups, where you're taking, lyrics from one song and the beat from another song and putting them together. And at that point, I'm like, yep, this is going to be our first production student. Yep. And I said, I got to bring Ja in, period. Like, I didn't even think of anyone else, because at Keep Spinning DJ Academy, Ja and my other production leader, Dreek, they work together and they handle all the production classes from a neurotypical standpoint. Because they Keep Spinning DJ Academy, that, when I started that, is, for neurotypical individuals. But however, Ja came in and, we worked together and I'm like, yeah, this is it. And, the first class that he and our Spin the Spectrum student worked together, we knew that was it.
Well, and the weird part about it was when Ethan, the student that we're talking about, and his parents are okay with us using his name. When he came in after he left, I mean, like both Jay and I were completely just blown. I mean, like Ethan will blow you away anytime you interact with him as far as his ability. But, I had walked out of the classroom and, after Ethan left, and I walked back in and I said, I think you should call Job Born, and this is just me meeting Job Born like one time, but you can just, if you work with autistic people for long enough, sometimes there are just certain people where you're like, I bet you'd be good, but I bet you'd be good. And this is, I knew nothing of Job Born other than just meeting him that one time. And I said, I think we need to let Ethan do production classes with Job Born. And at that point, Jay said, go, leave the school right now. Because I was literally having that same thought at that same moment, like go home right now and leave. And so we kind of, at that point, I think we sent Job Born a video of Ethan. And I think he was actually at a performance and
was doing something.
Yeah.
So I saw a big smile on Ja's face as you're describing this. So from your perspective and your experience, why don't you just take it from there at what led to this partnership that's been so successful?
You know what? Honestly, when I saw, Ethan, and that's our student, by the way, and what he was doing and his interest, it actually hit me right here in the heart, because I have a son and daughter that are in the autism spectrum. They're both adults now. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I saw qualities in him that I saw in my son on a positive note, and my interest spiked at that point in time. I wanted to get involved. And it's a great way to take some of the lessons that I learned as a father in dealing with a young man like our student. It was a great way for me to take those lessons that I learned from raising my son, some of them, and apply them to teach this young man.
So parental intuition plus technical expertise come together.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You just have a love as a father. There's a different thing you see, especially when you see a child that has something in common with yours. Just something in there that moves and motivates. And I felt like there was a divine purpose in getting involved as well. And I love that. I appreciate Jay and Courtney. Much love to y'all making that happen. Yes. Jay's been a great friend of mine for a very long time. Yeah. And he and I have experienced some of the greatest moments that you can as a musician out here. We've had some pinnacle moments, for Jay to even want to bring me in to a wonderful organization like Spin the Spectrum. It meant a lot to me. It became my duty to be a part.
And it sounds like you're calling in part.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy how, she introduced me to what I feel is my calling. And then Josh saying, I'm introducing him to his calling, because I can see that it is when I see him work with Ethan. And she says, okay, well, I can see it in you when you work with our other students. So it's just the universe not making mistakes, just, the planets and stars and all the things aligning and, putting it together.
Well, yeah. And, I do want to interject one thing, because it's been really cool for me to kind of observe the whole process. And, when Jay and I started, really before we kind of had our first student, I said, I'm going to tell you what I tell a lot of my clinical fellows that come in to do their CFYs with me, which is that when you are working with autistic and neurodivergent, kids that have some that need some complex communication support, you get this really cool opportunity that is typically only afforded to you in childhood, which is the opportunity to become someone's very first friend. And when you really get to become someone's very first friend as a kid, I mean, if you think back to how you felt about your first friend as a kid, that's always an awesome feeling, only you get to do this as an adult. And so you get to give it the respect that it deserves and things like that. You know, and you can, and you're more mature, and you get to be a good first friend. Yeah. And so I've got to see Jay become some of, you know, the people that I, you know, a lot of the kids and students that I love, you know, to become, you know, their first friends. And I've got to see, you know, Jawborn experience that really with Ethan in a musical sense. Yeah. And in fact, you know, because it's, when you do this kind of stuff, like, you know, as far as working with autistic and neurodivergent individuals in any capacity, at least for me, one of my primary goals is like, I want them to know that I see them. Because I feel like a lot of times you go through life when you experience the world in a different way, and you don't always feel seen. And that's a really important feeling. But then when you spend all your time trying, you know, not all your time, but when you spend a lot of time trying to do that, sometimes it kind of catches you off guard that they end up seeing you more than you thought that you saw them. And that actually happened recently with Jawborn in one of our production classes, which was, and I just have to tell this story because it was one of the coolest things I've ever got to, you know, kind of observe in my career, which is, you know, Jawborn produced On and On, and, you know, won Grammys for it and everything else. Well, Ethan came in a couple weeks ago and just casually said, I have a couple samples I want to make some beats off of today. Like, no, you know, no frills, there's no, just regular old day with Ethan. And the first sample that he plays is On and On. And he literally, you know, he made a beat, and it was like the coolest thank you card I could have ever witnessed. You know, because because it was like, you know, I could really tell it was like Ethan's way of saying, like, I know you see me, but I see you too.
Man, when I tell you the amount of love and gratification and just overall just being blown away, I experienced at that moment. Man, it's one of the top moments that I've had in years that I can remember, you know, and I couldn't exactly express that, in you know, in our session. I didn't want him to freak out or anything on, you know, like that. I was that excited, but when I left there, I had an energy that was long lasting, and that moment will resonate with me for a very long time. And see, so that young man, very special. And me, as many places as I've been, Jay, you already know, I've been in every studio. I've been across the world in, you know, different, various great environments. But that will stick out forever, you know, in amongst a whole bunch of great moments. That right there tops it. And, you know, when you see a young person, especially when you get engaged and you're teaching them stuff, to see the progress, you know, even if it's brick by brick or step by step or baby step by baby step, to see the progress is amazing. And it gives these young people hope and, you know, a chance out here, you know, to be loved, to be heard. Like we were just talking about that, to be seen. People just want to be loved, heard, and seen.
Well, yeah, and especially to have expressed his appreciation for you through a musical endeavor. So music is, to musicians, music is a prayer, and it's as deeply personal as prayer. And so to take something that's so personal and then to actually do something in good faith with it and to create it, like whether it's music or friendship or mentorship, energy cannot be faked. And I know this because I've played garbage solos in a funk fusion band in front of an audience of 60 people in a tiny bar that didn't resonate with 60 people. And I've played excellent stuff that really came from inside that resonated with a whole room of 1,000 people. And I just, that's the difference between meaning it and not meaning it. So I think the fact that your energies match up, there's no mistaking that. You can't force that. And I think one of the things that I know in my own experience being on the spectrum is that I really don't have a great ability to force it anyway. So I mask okay, whatever, if that's the word that is trending right now. But for the most part, for instance, if I didn't have an energetic connection with Barry, there's no way I would have done this podcast with him. It just can't be faked.
Well, yeah. And, it's like as an SLP, a lot of times when kids, come to you and they're non-speaking and, they start to communicate and things like that, you witness those moments all the time. You get to hear a kid say mom for the first time. You get to hear them tell their parents they love them for the first time. And so, there's always moments where it's like, as soon as they're out of the door, I'm like, whoop, okay, well, let me just, go ahead and my heart out of my chest and run it through a meat grinder and let's have hamburgers tonight. Like that's how it feels. But it's, for me, it's cool to watch, Job Horn and Jay Clip also, get their hearts ripped out of their chests and run through a meat grinder. but
I promise you, she loves it. Like, she just,
And if I could just add, and almost goes without saying, that the story that Jod just shared, again, is another way of shattering all of the negative myths and the stigma about autism.
Right.
I mean, here you have this young man who, at some level, intuitively knew exactly what to do to connect with you on something that you created. And that's amazing. Because, we don't say it anymore, but years ago we used to say, wait a second, an autistic kid's not supposed to be able to do that. That's what all the literature tells us.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a whole lot of empathy.
A heck of a lot of empathy and connection on an emotional level through music.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a critical point here.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. The brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that?
For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just go to getcopperhead.com. That's getcopperhead.com for your 2 free gifts with purchase. Getcopperhead.com.
We'd like to take a moment to thank you for listening to Uniquely Human, the podcast. It is so gratifying to hear that so many of you find value in what we share.
It is gratifying, and it's so much fun making this show together, Barry. Mm-hmm. Being able to meet with you every week and all the guests and listener support that we've received, it's such a joy to make this show. And of course, we are commercial free, but Barry and I would invite you to support this show in a number of different ways. That could be buying our books or even inviting us to speak live or virtually to your organization or to your community. Mm-hmm. To learn more about all of this, you can, of course, go to our websites, barrypresent.com or davidjfinch.com, to learn more about our speaking topics and how to work with us and all of the consultative services that we provide.
And we also want to know how we're doing. We are in a constant quality improvement mode here.
Yes.
So please make sure to leave comments and ratings, suggestions on social media. Contact us directly on the links on our website and recommend Uniquely Human, the podcast, to those in your lives. In conclusion, we are so grateful to you, our Uniquely Human community, for your support and loyalty, and we'll be keeping at it.
Yes, thank you all so much. Now back to the show.
So you've shared a couple of stories about individuals, but I'm sure our listeners are kind of curious as to the range of people who come to Spin the Spectrum, the age range, the ability range, and especially, a lot of my work is with parents and families, and I could just imagine how the parents light up. And how they see things that they never, ever thought they'd be able to even dream of with their son or daughter doing. So if you would just kind of go with that a little bit and share your experiences and also the people you serve.
Absolutely. So to all the parents and to all the people that we serve, we are, with the exception of babies, we're all ages, all levels. Yeah. That's if you want to come and you want to do this, you're accepted here. We'll figure out a way to do it. But we don't just believe in the typical, or at least what we view now as inclusion, which is you come into my space and then I say, oh my goodness, there is someone here who has some complex support needs. Let me go ahead and scramble real quick and put some things, sort of in place in a retroactive fashion, and I'm not, I'm happy for any form of inclusion, but if this is something that I'm doing and I'm doing it from here, from my heart, to me, if I want someone to feel included, that means I've planned for you. That I'm Czechoslovakian. I'm half Czechoslovakian. And so my grandparents, whenever anyone came to their house, say somebody diabetic came to their house, they had equal food options for the diabetic people already there. You didn't have to say, please provide some sugar-free options. If my grandmother found that out, you had the same options that everyone else in the house had. And so that's kind of where I came from. And so that's what I wanted to create, to foster with, Spin the Spectrum. And so, currently at the moment, we don't have any students that are on eye gaze devices. However, 2 years ago, we worked with JP Morgan Chase to develop an app to where when we have someone that comes in here and is on an eye gaze device and they want to learn to do this, we're ready for you. Yeah. We don't even, the app's already developed. Yes. When you come in here, if you forget your AAC device, I've got 4 already pre-programmed with DJ boards on them. Mm-hmm. If you're non-speaking, I've also, corrupted, I guess, the AAC program in a way to where, you can go through and even if you're non-speaking, you can still express a preference as far as what skill, because we are 100% student-led. Mm-hmm. They do not follow our agenda or our curriculum. Our students work based off of the skill that they're interested in. Right. And so we use AAC devices to allow them to preview the entire skill, because if you're a Gestalt learner, that's not going to help you just to show, okay, this is one cue button that you need to push in a long line of steps.
So in essence, you're making sure that not only are your students welcomed, but not only that, but that they belong.
Yes.
And not only belonging, but that you are bending over backwards to make sure that they can express their authentic voice, even if it isn't a vocal voice, mm-hmm. and make choices and express opinions, which is all about their personhood. That's wonderful.
Confidence.
Yeah. And even in our DJ classrooms, we've got calm down areas. We've got, different sensory areas that they can access even, when they're in the middle of learning.
Yeah. Neuro-affirming, that's the current term, right?
Yes.
Neuro-affirming. Yes.
Higher best.
I should say, too, you mentioned with the exception of babies, it's basically all ages. I do want to say that my wife for a very long time has said that Lil Baby would be an excellent MC name for me. So
okay. You could be the exception to the baby exception.
Yeah. She calls me Lil Baby more often than I would like.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. I want to ask Ja a question. I know so many parents who have brought their knowledge and their wisdom from being a parent into their work, whatever it might be. So I'm just curious, and I'm kind of throwing this out you cold turkey here. I didn't prepare you for this. What do you feel you've learned from your parenting that enables you to really connect with the people you support through Spin the Spectrum?
First thing is empathy as a parent, parental empathy. There's a soft spot in your heart there somewhere. You know what I mean? Yeah. that you develop as a parent for your child, and their mission, struggle, journey, and I believe that was like something like the main requirement I have to have to even come into a teaching environment or an enlightener or a guide or a mentor environment. You have to have empathy. That's probably the main quote unquote qualification. So that translated over. My students were musicians. I have one that just got a degree as a musician. Mm-hmm. And so you see that right there, me having that in common with my children, that over time, and having that connection as being, hey, I'm the dad that got the beats. Both my children, my son was in an award-winning jazz band in high school. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that kept me connected with him musically, even from a guidance standpoint. Mm-hmm. See what I'm saying? And I had the same, like my daughter just got her degree. So in music, throughout their journey, I've been engaged. Wow. That right there prepared me to be able to come over and work in an environment and an organization like Spin the Spectrum. See what I'm saying? Because I not only am I a music producer and a coach that I can teach, anyone, but I also have been engaged with my children in their music journey. And I've been there for the concerts, the shows. I've been there for the questions. I've taken them out. I've had this thing with them. And now I can go with Ethan and other students and kind of have, now that my kids are grown now. They're not kids anymore. But I can still have that thing, where I'm in their musical life. I can be a part of a young person's musical life and give them that knowledge continuously moving forward.
And with the love and the empathy, they also have some of your musical genes. So that's not yeah. That's an important piece. So in previous discussions, Courtney, you've shared with me some of the events that you create outside of the studio for some of your students to be involved. And I believe I recall one was at a museum in Dallas. And talk about that, because you do say that you really want to be a co-creator of inclusive community spaces. And we know how that is of such value for parents to hear, that it's not just happening within four walls, but it impacts life outside of a studio or a specific location.
Well, yes. And that's actually, there are two goals, as far as inclusion, for Spin the Spectrum. And one is what we're doing here with classes. But the second part is that we're going to take on the legwork of making spaces that are, often difficult to access or just very limited in their ability to provide access to neurodivergent and autistic people. And just going in there and fixing it, as far as making it accessible. And so right now I'm working with the Dallas Public Library, and hopefully, Dr. Rollins, Pam, who her social communication lab, hopefully I think they may help me out a little bit, but we're creating a sensory sensitive story time where, we're going to put the story on the floor for kids who like to pace. They can walk on different, types of sensory surfaces. We're going to project it on the screen. We're adding cube chairs to the library. We're adding visual support so they can follow along. And then, going through and kind of training the librarians to almost read the book in a way that you would maybe if you were using the SERTS methodology. And so we're kind of, providing those tips, because I do find, that a lot of parents notice, something is a little different when they take their kids to story time. So it's a tremendous opportunity. And it's also a tremendous opportunity to, help librarians be more inclusive and understanding. Because the library can be kind of difficult if, you do have some sensory issues, just depending on what those issues are. We're also working with the Dallas Arboretum to do communication boards in all the different areas of Dallas Arboretum. And then there's a school that we're actually their music special, which is called It's a Sensory World. And I think they're actually the second sensory gym in the United States of America. I mean, it's really cool school. And so based off of the success we've kind of had as being their music special, we're developing a curriculum so that other schools that are, for neurodivergent and autistic kids could potentially, use this as their music special. Because it is something that, no matter what your ability is, or, if you're limited fine motor wise or whatever, you can do something. You can participate in this in some way, and there's something to enjoy about it.
And if I can interject really quick, all of this started from the event that you initially were talking about at the Dallas Museum of Art.
Yes.
They had a sensory day, and before that happened, she met with the executives there, and they were so blown away by all these things that just in a single 30-minute meeting that she was able to fix. So they said, hey, you just, why don't you just come and join our team, and just fix everything, all the Dallas public facilities. So, she always likes to brag about me, but I was there to witness that in real time. And I just saw the lady's face just lighting up with everything that she's saying. And I'm like, yep, okay, here we go. Yeah. So the Dallas Museum of Art event sort of started everything. And it was just basically just being more inclusive for the kids that were coming.
Yep.
And
But I don't want to misrepresent it either. There is legwork involved, because this was like a pop-up workshop that we did at the Dallas Museum of Art, which is incredible in and of itself, that the Dallas Museum of Art was so forward thinking in that. Like, I don't know of any other museums in the US that's like, hey, let's have a day where we have a lot of neurodivergent kiddos come in and just, have free access to the museum. So that was incredible in and of itself. But, they had me come in and say, okay, what's the best space, acoustically for us to do this? Where could our potential problem areas be sensory wise? Like, what supports do we need and where do we need to place them, and things like that. I created a social story for the whole event. And then that ended up leading to me actually writing a social story for the museum in general.
Yeah. I think a lot of organizations, especially in the arts, they want to do the right thing, and they don't know what they don't know. And when they hear you going in and making some suggestions, it's like oh yeah, well, we could do that. I didn't know that would be of such help to so many autistic and neurodivergent people coming in.
Like that, 30 minutes. I was just saying the whole thing like that. I didn't know we could do that. Oh, that's great. The whole thing. So yeah.
Well, and what ends up happening is that they make these minor changes, right? It's not something where they have to go to the board and get $7 million of funding from some mezzanine, it's just whatever. But what ends up happening is the neurotypical people benefit from it too. Who doesn't want a sensory-friendly space?
Absolutely. Universal design. Everybody benefits from these accommodations. Yes. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean, and even in that workshop, it was funny because, of course, there are things that, at least in my life, there are just a certain number of things where I just don't find out until it's too late. It's not in a bad way, but there was a portion of the workshop where they wanted them to go like to a room that was behind where we were to participate in some other activities, and they said, well, how are we going to get them to go back there? How are they going to know that there's something back there, because it was kind of a hidden area? And I said, well, just tape arrows on the floor. Right. And they were like, oh yeah, we could do that. It's like, get some masking tape and tape an arrow on the floor.
Very low hanging fruit there.
Absolutely.
Yes. And by the way, I will say, bringing this kind of full circle, no pun intended, is going back to the production side of this as well. I don't have any experience DJing, but I will say from a production standpoint, Job Bourne probably can relate to this as well. There is nothing more sensorily calming and at the same time invigorating than a studio control room. During, before, after a session, doesn't matter. When they get the lights right in the control room, the energy in that room connects everybody like a rope. It's just incredible. And so I think that getting, just like the same way I always advocate for, hey, if your kid has a lot of occupational therapy interventions going on, maybe get them into swimming, because swimming is an excellent way for them to tumble and roll and move and tire themselves out and blah, blah, blah. If your kiddo has, or even the adults in your life have this really burning sort of creative, unique energy, and you can put them into a sensory space like a studio, it's just game changing.
Yes. Sensory space, and in so many ways, even the smell of the electronics when you walk in the studio.
Yeah.
It's completely different than any other smell that you experience anywhere else in the day.
Yeah.
And you walk in, and the energy seems like the ions in the air seem to change. Mm-hmm. And there's a smell. There's so many things you can touch. There's knobs, buttons you can turn, you can press.
Yes.
I mean?
And it's all patterns. Like, you get the channel strips. You learn channel 1 and you learned 1 through 96.
Yep. You have all these lights. Like, you see it, you have all the lights, and it's a great place to experience, have a sensory experience for anyone.
Well, I just learned something new. I'm going to really pay attention to the fragrances of my electronics from now on. I never thought about that.
One DJ student, and I don't know if anybody else listening or watching this is ever going to relate to this, but apparently all blow dryers made after 2007 do not have the terrible smell that he hates. So I totally believe electronics emit a smell.
That awareness, my goodness.
Yeah, he knows if it's a 2007 blow dryer.
Yeah, I just had to buy a new DOCSIS 3.1, cable modem and wireless router for my house. And I unboxed the thing and it was like, yeah, that's nice. That's high bandwidth right there.
Yeah. You knew it. Yeah. You knew it.
Okay, so unfortunately, we're kind of running short on time a little bit, but I'm curious about your dreams. I'm curious about your dreams for Spin the Spectrum. You've done so many amazing things already, but from the get-go, you guys were dreamers and you made this happen. So looking forward, just a few quick things you would love to see happen in your dreams.
Yeah. The biggest dream is for this to be its own like self-sustaining biome. Like we want our students to turn into instructors, and we want our students to turn into instructor evaluators and SLP evaluators. And but we don't just want that. We want to expand this because there are so many things about event production and music production and DJing that someone who is autistic or neurodivergent could really do if this is what they enjoy, from handling the cables and the setup and the wiring, to even contracts, to managing inventory, if that's what you're into. You love a good spreadsheet, and so there's so many, and none of these you have to really kind of adhere to like our hardcore neurotypical social rules. These are all things that you can kind of do and be you, and it's fine. Which it should be that way everywhere, but there's so many opportunities that we could provide, just based off of these few things that we're doing. So eventually what we want to happen is we want to participate in this because we love it, but eventually we want this to be run by autistic people. And we want autistic instructors, and we want autistic SLPs, and we want autistic, and neurodivergent students to, help us expand this and make every part of this an opportunity for someone who's neurodivergent.
Truly create careers for individuals in the neurodivergent community.
Yes. Or just recreation. If you want to do it to just screw around,
just something cool,
that is allowed. You're allowed to just do it for fun. Because that's one thing that I did truly, that has always bothered me about a lot of activities for neurodivergent individuals, is it always turns into therapy. It's always them trying, their instructor trying to get them to achieve this next goal and everything else. What about what they want to achieve? What if they just want to do it for fun?
Yeah. And Ja, do you have any dreams to add to those?
For Spin the Spectrum?
Yes.
Dream is to become or to impact a large community of people who need the therapy or the interaction, the teaching. Would like to impact some success stories. Would like to be part of a story that a person just overcame some major challenges in their life. I would love to be a part, and for us as an organization, Spin the Spectrum, to be a part of success stories, of breakthroughs. You know what I'm saying? To be honest with you, the simplest thing is, man, my dream is for these young folks and the people involved to be happy in their life, and Spin the Spectrum to be a part of the happiness. That's simple.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Dave, any parting thoughts here?
I'm in love with all of this, and I'll tell you, I diverged. I started in music engineering and ended up getting a job in semiconductors, and here I am, like 26 years later, a semiconductor nerd. But I still, everything, it doesn't matter what the sound is. I want to work with it. So like when I did your audiobook, Barry, and produced that, and being able to dial in and say, like, those are the timbral characteristics of Barry's voice that I want everybody to hear. If I hadn't read your book, I wouldn't know what it was about, even though I listened to it for about 80 hours, because I was just listening to the sound of your voice the whole time. I wasn't listening for content. So
I know that Brooklyn accent really gets to you, doesn't it?
Music to my ears, my friend. No, this is wonderful. And I will say, let me know what I can do to support Spin the Spectrum. Literally anything I can do. In fact, I was just speaking to, I spoke to an audience of 4,000 industrial hygienists last week. I didn't know what an industrial hygienist is, but there's somebody who makes sure that the workplace is safe for workers. Okay. So, but they asked me to speak, so I did. And backstage, the teleprompter operator, I was sitting with her and just cracking jokes or whatever. And she's like, "Oh, hey, you remind me a lot of my son." I get that a lot. And she's like, he's on the spectrum, loves music, loves the production aspect of music. I just don't know how to tie him into something. And it's things like this. It's like Spin the Spectrum, where I'm like, get him in there. And so please let me know what I can do to help support. We'll have links and things to all information that you want people to have access to.
All right, guys, this has been terrific. And keep us surprised as to all the wonderful kind of future events that are coming up for Spin the Spectrum. So.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody tuning in and checking us out.
Yes.
You know, we are here, reach out to us. We have work, we'll travel. We'll go anywhere to help anyone.
Yeah, we do pop-up workshops. So we'll travel all over the US. So if you want to come, we want to come.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
so great.
Right.
Wow.
Be well, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings. Have a good one, y'all. Thanks for having us.
Sure, absolutely.